A deep dive. We haven't done a deep dive in a long time.
I know. I'm very excited. Wait, I have
I guess we did Ice Blooded Barbarians, but
but I think that was a while ago. Time has no meaning anymore.
right, exactly.
Okay, I have some like fun stats to share with you, Sarah. So, a couple of months ago, and I have like been saving this in my inbox and always have been like, oh, I should like share this. And then today is finally the day I remembered to actually do it as we're recording. I got an email from a woman essentially who like is a publicist, and she has like a bunch of information about Bumble, the dating app. And I was like, okay, this is like really interesting. And what it says is, so she shared this with me and I was like, yeah, this is really fun. I should talk about this on the podcast. So basically it says that according to Bumble's findings, 61% of Gen Z and millennial daters agree that they are looking for a partner who shares their love of reading. And I think this was partly inspired by
61%.
61%. And
wow.
Apparently this is like part of this was like driven by, Dua Lipa is a big reader, and she and her met her partner, this guy she's going to marry, I guess, while they were reading the same book, which is really cute.
That's cute.
I know. So I think like one of the things that's really interesting is like, right, so there's all this information that like 72%. Now, meanwhile, these are dating apps. Maybe this is aspirational. I believe, I understand that, but I still found this charming, right? That 72% of Bumble users say it's fun to geek out over a book with who they date, that they are more likely to swipe right if the person mentions a love of reading in their profile.
Sure. Well, there are less chances of you being a dirtbag.
Sure. And over half of Gen Z and millennial daters agree having a shared love for reading is a good indicator of romantic compatibility. I was like, isn't that cute?
Amazing.
I just felt very warm and fuzzy hearing these
Amazing.
stats.
Everybody, Dua Lipa and her partner, Callum Turner, met because they sat next to each other, and she was reading Trust by Hernan Diaz.
Which is a great fucking book, everybody.
And he said, I just finished the first chapter. And she looked at me and said, I just finished the first chapter too. And he said, so we're on the same page. Listen. Also,
amazing.
Well done, sir.
Hey, this guy's no dummy, right? Yeah. Anyway, and Dua Lipa actually like really loves books. I'm like very charmed by it. She does like, I think YouTube. I don't watch them all the time, but
these two are very cute together too. There's a lot of pictures of them smiling with each other because they both read books.
I know. It's really cute. So anyway, I just was like, I love that. I love that, people are like, yeah, reading is important. So obviously we think so.
I like that
reading,
too.
everybody.
I've been thinking a lot because the paperback of These Summer Storms is coming out soon, May 12th. And I got my author copies.
Fun.
And I opened the box and I pulled one out, and it's one of those like floppy.
Ooh, I love that.
Paperbacks.
Yeah.
And listen, I love a floppy paperback.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
I love a book. And I said this to Eric, like, I love a book that can get messy, that feels like this is not a precious book. This is like a floppy book. You throw it in the bottom of your beach bag. You take it to the pool. It's okay if it gets stained. It's okay if it gets like messed up or scuffed. Like, you can dog ear it. You could break the spine. Like, I think one of the things that I'm really struggling with over the last few years in this sort of rise of like books as objects is like, for me, books are not, I feel so the opposite about my books. Like, write in them, rip them, read them until they're falling apart. Like, books are meant for that kind of, in my heart of hearts, like, books are meant to be messed up and really like scarred. And so I have this like very floppy book, and I've been thinking like, I want to see people like reading it in the wild,
Yeah.
Of course and so I think like that's that's really a sign of, I mean, like, listen, that's not to say, listen, there have always been people who are very careful with their books, like, and who deliver you, who are very careful not to break spines, are very careful never to like scuff them or bang them or do anything to them. But I mean, for me, the sign of a book well loved is like,
Yeah, one that's been through the
it's
ringer.
been through it.
I think I can hold like
Dropped
both
in
truths.
the pool.
Yeah. Well, you can't read it anymore then.
Well,
I hold, well, it can be as it dries, maybe.
yeah,
Then it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
7 times its natural size. I actually don't have tons and tons of like special editions or anything. I have to really like love a book to want to like buy a physical copy of it, like just in general. But so my librarian at work, I've been talking to about the fact that I've been reading some non-romance, everybody. I've been cheating on romance with Dungeon Crawler Carl. Have you heard about this?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's
Everybody's obsessed with it.
okay. And I was like, I think I would like this. And basically, what you need to understand about me, and I'm sure everybody already intuitively understands this about me, I read romance and then I read another set of books that I like all kind of fit into like what I would call like the Reacher box, right? So Reacher and Murderbot and Dungeon Crawler Carl are all basically like the same, which is like, like a stern, taciturn character like thrust into extraordinary circumstances who has to just like, it's like save the day and save the world or whatever. And anyway, so I was like, well, and sometimes it's good for me to take a break from romance, right? Like when I get a little, like, I'm like, how can I like just read something different? But I've read all of Reacher and the new Murderbot book isn't out yet. So I've read all of Murderbot. And then I was like, Carl, you prince, I love you. So anyway, I am really charmed by it, but I read the first one. It's in Kindle Unlimited, so I've been reading it there. But then my librarian friend sent me this thing that is happening in Chicago at the end of May, on May 24th. I will put this link in show notes because I think I'm going to go. And it is at a place called The Goblin Market, which is a manga store. And what they are doing is having a bedazzling your book, but it's Dungeon Crawler Carl.
Oh my God.
So
I've
like,
seen these places.
Yes.
Bedazzling.
So it's like we will provide you with a brand new original, brand new hardcover of Dungeon Crawler Carl. And then you can come in and bedazzle it. And I was
incredible.
I was literally like, okay, why do I want to do this so much? And I think partly it's just because it sounds fun. Like I need to find a friend to go with. But also, I think the part of it that also sounds sort of fun is like, I don't know, like this book is like pure mayhem. There is like a very charming cat in it that, because its magical world, has learned to talk and like can charm anybody.
Right. This cat is famous.
Yes, right. Princess Donut is her name. Anyway, it's been great, but I was really like, it's sort of a fun, like, take this book and like bedazzle it is hilarious. So anyway, I might have to go to that.
That's amazing.
Right. I'm going to be like, it's going to be a bunch of like romance people invading this event.
Okay, well, that's perfect. And then you definitely shouldn't like, throw that off, into the pool. But and I think that there are spaces obviously for like great special editions. For example,
right.
The historical special edition that is coming via Kickstarter from AH2 and Fated Mates. And like part of what's cool about that, though, part of what I am drawn to about that is, as somebody who I've said, I'm on the record for like special editions don't move me, right? But these books really do move me because no one's ever done it for historicals.
Yes.
And so it feels like I want them to be leather bound and gold foiled. And I want these books to have that treatment. Like I want Indigo to have that treatment. I want Butterfly Swords and, Derek Craven to have that treatment. And so that's like, for me, a different thing because I think like, I want special editions. I think like all the best historicals. Obviously, I am the correct voice of which historicals should have special editions. I mean, whatever. Like everybody deserves to have their favorite books leather bound on their shelves. This is where I say like go to show notes and you can click on the link and sign up for more updates on the Kickstarter. But And then, the other day there was an auction raising money for, I think, like families that have people in ICE detention, and somebody rebound 3 paperback copies of Bombshell, like in these like stunning, like they cut off the covers and like built these like hardcover bindings for them with original art of Tommy. And it was like really amazing. I mean, books as works of art, right?
Right.
This did make me think of a story though. So Eric is reading this the book. There's right now this like new book that came out, Apple, the First 50 Years, and it's like compiled by David Pogue, who's a tech reporter. It's like 600 pages, hardcover, color edition, where like it's essentially like half coffee table book, half biography of the company, right? And at the beginning, it talks about Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who are the 2 guys who like got together and made Apple at the very beginning. And apparently Steve Wozniak is like a very, very big prankster. And his mom, when he was a kid, was reading The Exorcist when it came out. And like she was so like terrified of it and also felt like it was like an evil book. And so she was like, this is the most evil book I've ever read. And she threw it off the end of a pier.
Okay.
And so he went to a bookstore, got a second copy, ran it under the faucet and put it on her bedside table.
Okay. That is really messed up. Oh my God. Oh.
But also very funny.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Were you ever a Friends fan?
Yes.
So the episode where Joey is like, I put scary books in the freezer.
Oh,
and he
man.
and Rachel have like she's reading The Shining and he's reading Little Women. And he like there, and so she's like, it's so scary, and that's when he says like, oh, I just put it in the freezer. I mean,
what a dumb man. He was talking about like the primordial himbo for me, Yeah.
That's
so
also
funny.
that is the famous scene. That's the famous episode where I forget what happens, but she and Joey also get into a big argument, and to win the argument, she screams, Beth dies.
The other thing that's really funny is that I'm like, the book thing I remember from Friends is that there's like a whole part where like, I guess Chandler, somebody finds Rachel's like Harlequin and is like, this is a dirty book, and it's actually, maybe I'm making that up, but I do sort of remember like one of these men finding it and being like shocked and appalled by it.
Anyway, I do think resurrecting The Exorcist.
Yeah, that's
pretty great. That's a pretty great prank.
I'm not really a prankster, but that to me is really fucking funny. That's pretty great. That's amazing. All right,
leaving it wet on your mom's nightstand.
That is, I mean, that's like evil. Like that's actually like, which I guess, that's The Exorcist for you, like making us all do crazy things.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Michelle Ruoff, author of A Summer to Stay.
So everybody, this is the first in a new series from Michelle, the Cedar Falls series. It is set in Maine. And she wants you to know this has a big Stars Hollow vibe. So if you're looking for your Gilmore Girls vibe, this is the one for you. Ava Hansen left Cedar Falls and Owen Fowler behind 10 years ago, moving to New York and like making a new life for herself there. But now she's back. She's grieving for her dad, packing up his cabin and counting the days until she can get out of there. Her plan is simple. Don't stay long, don't reopen old wounds, and definitely don't fall for Owen again. I think we all know how this is going to turn out.
That's definitely not going to work.
Yeah, Owen is a
good dummy.
Textbook romance hero at this point. He's a devoted single dad, the owner of the town's beloved coffee shop, and the unlikely buyer of the bed and breakfast they once dreamed of restoring.
No,
come on. And so
see, Ava, you're cooked.
Seeing Ava again stirs up everything he thought he'd accepted, including the future he stopped believing was possible. So Ava really has to decide, is her ambition and this big job back in New York worth the loneliness it costs? Or is the life she ran from the one she's been searching for all along?
Well, listen, if you are looking for a contemporary romance with small town vibes, single dads who are your best friend's brother, and a found family, then this one just might be for you. You can get it right now in print, ebook, or with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. And Michelle wants you to know that an audiobook is coming soon. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks so much to Michelle Ruoff for sponsoring this week's episode. Welcome to Fated Mates, everyone. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them.
And I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and editor. And Sarah's right. This week we are doing a read-along. We haven't done one in a while.
It's a historical read-along.
Yes. So, and tell us the story about how this came about, because someone suggested this to you. Don't you remember?
No.
Oh, well, okay. Let me tell you.
Tell the story.
Sarah.
Wait, somebody did.
Correct. I think it was at that Rhode Island thing.
Must have been.
Yeah. So Sarah was at that Rhode Island thing. That's what its official name is.
It's a really good story, everybody.
And she texted me.
I was
and
at
was
the
like, yeah.
Linden Place historical event for historical romance.
Isn't that what I just said?
Yeah, exactly. That Rhode Island thing in Bristol, Rhode Island, which is, and hopefully they're doing it another time. They're doing a second one next year. But go on, Jen.
Well, anyway, you texted me and you were like, a reader came up to me and said, you all should do a read-along of the Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie.
And we agreed.
Yeah, and you said, that's a great idea. What do you think? And I said, that is a great idea.
Because this book is terrific.
This book is terrific. Yeah.
When did you first read it?
I was trying actually to figure that out. I did go back to look to see. Sometimes I can figure it out, like if I bought it on Amazon, right? Like there's a record of its sale to me. But clearly that is not the case, because I did read it in a mass market paperback at some point in the 2010s. But I have no idea when that happened. And then I think much later in the pandemic, I read the second one, The Scandalous Marriage of Lady Isabella Mackenzie. Is that the name of that one? And then I actually downloaded the fourth one about the brother, Hart, the Duke. But I don't know that I've ever read it. So I was kind of like, oh, that's fun. Shopping my own Kindle.
Yeah, and Cameron has one too. I mean, there are...
Yeah. Right.
In fact, I think there are 5. I think the nephew
there's
has
more
one
of them.
too.
I was sort of
lots
looking, and I was like, "There's a lot of them. Who are these people?
They blow out
or something."
A lot of
how it goes.
Scots.
Yeah.
The Mackenzies
Well,
breed like
and
rabbits.
Here's what I will say. The reason I'm saying I read it in the 2010s. Okay, so it came out in 2009. I did look this up. Is because I definitely read it before before I read the Kiss Quotient. And I bring that up because I think of that book as being kind of like really like naming this is a neurodivergent autistic woman on page, right? And then that being a huge hit. And of course, like Ian Mackenzie does not, he is clearly neurodivergent, and I think we would all say autistic, but he does not, it's not named because that didn't exist, like that name, that diagnosis didn't exist. And so I remember when I read, and the reason I'm saying this is I remember when I read the Kiss Quotient sort of thinking like, oh, this is this is so great, right? Like for so many reasons I love the book, but also kind of thinking like a lot of people at that time were like, this is the first, maybe it's just they meant the first trad book, like who knows, right? Or the first book that they had read. And I remember kind of thinking like, yeah, but what about Ian Mackenzie? So, I'm only saying this to just say like I read it before the Kiss Quotient, I think.
Oh, yeah. I had it, I ordered it from Amazon on September 22nd, 2010. And when I read it the first time, so it's a 2009 pub, this book. And what I would say is, here's what I can tell you about the world at that time. So it was published by Dorchester Books back in the day.
What's that? I don't even know what that is.
So Dorchester was a small publishing company that it was like, I mean, it was maybe the size, I don't know. I don't know the finances.
It wasn't an imprint. It was its own.
It was its own company, and it was Dorchester, and it was sort of like Kensington, or Entangled. Okay. Like it had a lot. It was very respected. Like people, when you made a list of possible romance publishers in 2009,
that was one of them.
Dorchester was on the list. In fact, I think 9 Rules was sent to Dorchester.
Oh, interesting.
As an editor at Dorchester looked at it. And it was edited, this is what I know. So at the time, it was sort of a big deal when that book came out. And it was a big deal because it had, and the only reason why I remember this, because I looked specifically at the original cover that I owned, which I couldn't find anywhere here. So I was looking online, and in the cover copy so this is the original one. The current version of Ian Mackenzie has like a lady in a red dress, like it's like a clinch, and she's in a red dress. The original version has this like pale blue cover that just like has the whole, like it says Jennifer Ashley, the madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie, and it has like a strip. Of a clinch.
I'll put everybody, if you ever look at show notes, like, and it's a book like this, often I'll try and like track down any of the, the covers, the original versus whatever it is now, just like so you can see that.
It was a huge deal. Like, it was a big book, and it was a big book early in Jennifer Ashley's career. Like, she now she writes under multiple names. She's written like probably 100 books total. She's like very well known as in both historical and paranormal. She writes under we'll put in Allison
Archer. I don't remember.
We'll put that in show notes too, everybody. She writes under different names as well, and she just like.
All right. This Allison James and Ashley Gardner are
Allison
her other
James,
names.
That's right. But this book, just everybody was talking about it, and everybody was talking about it for lots of different reasons. One, it was incredibly sexy, right? Like, for the time, it was. I mean, this is a book. I mean, at some point, I assume we're going to talk about the word cunny, which feels like there were only 2 of us who were writing cunny, and it was her and it was Elizabeth Hoyt, and that was really. Although Elizabeth Hoyt really prefers quim, but
we all have our favorite words, Sarah.
Sure. So, and then on top of it, it was like the idea that Dorchester had produced this kind of like remarkable book.
Yeah, right.
Was really impressive. Yeah. Like it felt like, oh my God, like Dorchester was really like putting a stake in the ground.
Yeah.
Now, when this happened and Dorchester published this book, it was within minutes, it felt like it was going to, it was announced that Dorchester was closing.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then it was sort of this thing where we all sort of felt like, well, what's going to happen to these Dorchester books? And so Dorchester's romance imprint was, I don't know if it was entirely romance. It might have been romance and horror. Was leisure books, which might be something that you are more like aware of.
I mean, honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. Probably not, right? It really wasn't until I started reviewing
that you started
that
I
attention. Even started paying any attention to imprints. I mean, at all. Like, right? Like, I mean, I probably had like a vague sense that like, oh, Avon, you know what I mean? But like only the most vague sense.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. So, and then this was the first time that I had ever seen, I mean, I was, 12 and a half years old. It was the first time I had ever seen, my first book was coming out, like kind of came out right around that time. And it was one of those moments where we were like, none of us had ever seen an imprint close like this. Yeah. And like, Dorchester and Leisure have been around for 50 years. Like, this was not a fly-by-night organization. They just couldn't keep the doors open for whatever.
Yeah.
For those of you who, so I mean, what's useful for everybody who was around then or like cares about the names, Chris Kiesler was like the editorial director then. He was a man in romance. And like, as you can imagine, like romance really loved having a man around. And like Chris was sort of a figure that you would see at conferences and everybody knew who he was. But the editor of Lord and Mackenzie was Leah Haltenschmidt, who is now at Forever, like heading up the romance imprint at Grand Central. She is, I want to say she's Kennedy's editor. She's Abby Jimenez's editor. Like,
yeah, that's like a big name.
Listen, this is a person who like romance is in her DNA.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I ever met Leah, she was working for Dorchester. I think we met at like Lady Jane's Salon, which was this like once a month romance reading series here in the city. We'd meet in this like kind of like sketchy, dark, like kind of sexy bar on Houston Street that like if you turned on the lights in that place or brought a black light in there, I think you probably wouldn't have had a great time. But like we met like every Monday, like every, third Monday of the month or whatever. And I met Leah there and she said she worked for Dorchester. And I was like, oh my God, I love Ian Mackenzie. And she was like, I edited that book.
Wow.
And we talked about how she just, and I'm sorry, Leah, if you're listening, but like, I'm going to probably like I'm going to mangle some words you told me, but I feel like she told me like she got it in hand and she just knew. It was like, something nobody else had ever done, and like it was so special, and it really was. But so Dorchester, I'm sort of running my mouth in history here, but
listen, if people are tuning into the deep dives, it's for this stuff, right?
But this kind of also, I feel like it's important when we talk about the history, like we've sort of committed as Veda Mates to talk about the history of the genre and like get as much of it spoken as we possibly can. And I feel like this is one of those stories that I never would have thought to tell if not for this book.
Yeah.
So Dorchester fell apart, and when a publisher dies, everyone, they sell it for parts.
Yeah.
And what's interesting in this case is it was the first time, certainly, I'd ever seen a publisher fall apart, and other publishers came in and said, I'm going to buy these 10 authors backlist.
Yeah.
And so, like, the authors didn't get offered their backlists back. Like, some of them did, right? Like, if nobody wanted your backlist,
right,
then maybe you got the offer to have your backlist back. But, this is where Christine Feehan, I think, was with Dorchester, and like her whole backlist was bought by Avon.
I thought she went to Berkeley. Christine Feehan's, I thought was a Berkeley. I'm pretty sure Christine Feehan's at Berkeley.
Even that backlist?
I don't know.
But Jennifer Ashley was bought by a bunch of Dorchester books were bought by Avon.
Mm-hmm.
And a bunch were bought by Berkeley. And now Ian Mackenzie is at Berkeley.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I haven't really thought too hard about it, but I wonder if those later Mackenzie books are also at Berkeley. I'm looking
really
now.
Interesting.
It looks like a lot of them are self-published. So, but anyway, so The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie has a really beautiful cover, as do all of those sort of early Mackenzie books. I mean, they all have lovely clinches, but because when she went to Berkeley,
right, that's what happened.
They rejacketed it, and they, made this.
Right. Yeah, and that's like the one that I read for sure was the.
Sure, and then we all went and we bought all of them.
Sure.
Because, I mean, who doesn't love a family of big Scottish brutes?
And you have somewhat recently talked about rules for a proper governess on one of theirs. And that's Berkeley. That was 2014.
It looks like the Mackenzie series ends at Berkeley in book 8. And then, which is The Stolen Mackenzie Bride. And then book 9, which is Alec Mackenzie's Art of Seduction, starts probably with like self-pub from Jennifer. But if any of this is incorrect, please let us know and we'll change, we'll make notes in show notes. But that is what I remember is like this book was sort of swept up and the whole series, and it was really sort of devastating. I remember sort of being at RWA and having conversations with other historical writers that like we didn't know what was going to happen to this series. And because it was all happening, Dorchester was shut down in 2010.
Yeah. So, right, like only one book in. And it was clearly, I mean, if you read this book, it's clearly setting up like a 4-book series with these four brothers, right?
All
like
these
there's
brothers, all this mystery around like the Duke
right.
and did he kill anybody? Like,
right, exactly. This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Jenny Lynn Wire, author of All Our Next Times.
So All Our Next Times is the first in the Fallen Brook series, which is a 4-book series about the small town of Fallen Brook, where love is supposed to be simple, but our heroine has fallen for her 2 best friends. These 3 have been in love, or rather, she's been in love with Jason and Ryder since she was 9 years old. They were inseparable, bound by a friendship that was totally unbreakable when they were kids. And now, as they've grown older, their feelings have deepened into something much, much more. This is very complicated because, you can't be in love with one best friend without it being complicated, let alone being in love with 2 of them. One of them will hold her heart, and the other will never let her go. This is a newly revised version of the book, and it is available right now. But it ends on a shocking cliffhanger. But the final book will be out this summer, so you can start right now and head through them.
Yeah, exactly. Tee yourself up and get ready. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. And that is available in print, audio, and with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. Thanks to Jenny Lynn Wire for sponsoring this week's episode. So the plot of the book is basically that we meet Ian Mackenzie as he is buying a priceless sort of Chinese bull, not a vase, a bull.
Lord of Scoundrels style.
Yes, exactly. And the man he's buying it from is this sort of kind of really clearly needs money because he is about to marry an heiress, and he wants to really essentially it's really interesting. He's sort of claiming it's one thing, but romance readers will understand that what this means is this man is in real dire straits, but he wants to appear to have money in the lead up to the wedding so that then he can sort of take over this woman's money, and that'll be that, right? We've all seen this a million times before. But the thing that's interesting is this woman he's about to marry, Beth Ackerley, is an heiress with a very unusual story herself, which is that she was... and again, I there's a lot of great things to love about this, but she was essentially a servant kind of in the household of an elderly woman, and she was her companion, not like the maid or a cook or whatever. She was the woman's companion, and then this woman died and had no family, and so she left her house in Mayfair and her 110,000 pounds, which I'm assuming is an insane amount of money, to Beth, who is now sort of trying to figure out how to be a lady. So Ian is essentially clues into sort of maybe something's going on with this guy who he clearly does not like. And he then shows up that night at the opera and meets Beth and warns her, has sort of prepared a note in advance that's basically you can't trust this guy, he's up to no good, and slips her the note. And this begins sort of their really kind of fascinating and very drama filled in the way only an old historical can be sometimes.
Yeah.
Romance where there's a big mystery. And the thing about Ian Mackenzie is that everyone in London thinks that he is mad, as per the title, because he spent most of his sort of childhood and teenage years in an asylum. And only after their father died, the Duke did Hart, his older brother, get Ian out of the asylum and sort of kind of bring him back into society. And this is something that everybody else sort of treats him then as a bit of a pariah, but Beth is, as someone who is outside of society, doesn't really care about this.
That's all correct. That is how the book begins. That is the setup. And there's a lot of sort of complexity to Beth's past. Like,
Yeah.
her father was kind of a grifter. Like, he was tried to sell himself as a titled person when he didn't have a title. Which is how when, her mother died, when he died, and then her mother died. And like, that's kind of how she was sort of sent to an orphanage, and then she became a teacher in the orphanage, and then married like the owner of the headmaster of the orphanage or whatever. And so like she sort of has, like Jen said, a real sort of around the house is kind of backstory.
Yeah.
That ends up being in a lot of ways like at first you think this is going to be the conflict. And it sort of does rise up a couple of times, but the reality is that Beth and Ian both are so sort of committed to truth, and for different reasons, that it's really interesting, the like structure of Beth's past, because she doesn't lie. She tells the truth about who she is to Ian. She feels very like, it seems very much like Beth is she's sort of a fish out of water in this. Like, she's inherited all this money. Everybody's sort of sniffing around. This like kind of gross dude has like offered her marriage, and she agrees basically because like she knew him beforehand.
Right.
And then, but like, the moment she meets Ian, she's like, I mean, it's almost like it doesn't even really matter that Ian's like, this is a bad dude. She's just like so into him. And then they start, and before we get into like the sexy bits, and God knows like part of the reason why this book was so great is because it was so sexy. But like she tells him the truth from the jump.
Yeah.
And because he is so unique in terms of personality, and so, forthright in terms of personality, like her truth doesn't even bother him.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And it is said over and over again, like Ian is incapable of lying.
Right. That's in fact, the plot turns on essentially that being true.
Yeah. And so these two people like living in their mutual truth becomes the love story here.
Yeah. And I think like it's worth kind of talking about Ian then as a character too, which is it's really so obviously there's a lot of sort of things that got like revealed over time, but his father sent Ian to this asylum when he was 9 or 10. Ian had been kind of willful, right? He obviously had a lot of sensory issues. He would, sort of scream when things were like he, didn't have a lot of like kind of coping strategies. And so his father found him, sort of obviously like difficult and strange. Like he had no model for like, why is this child acting this way? But and it's like sort of implied throughout like the beginning that this is kind of how Ian got sent away, or that's sort of the way like I think readers would assume, like, oh yeah,
his father's family sent him to the asylum.
Right, and his behavior was sort of strange, and they didn't know what to do with it, and therefore like they just sent him to this asylum where of course all these fucking quacks did all the things quacks do. But about halfway through the book, what we realize is that Ian actually witnessed his father murdering his mother in a rage. He chokes her to death. And Ian's father essentially like is getting him out of the way to like hide that evidence. Ian can't lie. If someone asked, did you see what happened or what, anything about the mother would come up and Ian would sort of say what he would say. And so it's also really fascinating that the truth of like sort of Ian's life is determined not by being autistic, but rather by being, by having witnessed being somewhere he shouldn't have been and like seeing something he shouldn't have seen. I wanted to like go back for a minute and talk about the word autistic. I think like that's what people would use. The book itself, of course, does not diagnose or name this, but, he has what I think a lot of readers might consider sort of classic hallmarks, right? He can't really make direct eye contact. He has, right, like sort of doesn't understand like imagery or figures of speech, right? When people are sort of talk around things, he doesn't quite get what's going on. He can't follow multiple people talking at the same time. But he also has sort of, like a preternatural gift for like, right, he has photographic memory. He
Right.
has a gift for
He
like,
remembers every conversation.
yes, right, things like that. And so, I think it doesn't necessarily like matter in terms of that, but it's the kind of the way society thinks of him versus the way he thinks of himself that's interesting. And then what Beth also discovers is that Hart really benefits from his photographic memory, that this is like the work that Ian is doing for his brother is because Hart is like a politician. And so, he will have Ian in the room when they're like sort of negotiating. He'll have Ian looking over contracts because, of course,
he's extraordinarily high functioning too. Like, and he has a sort of gift for math in the sense that, like, if he looks at, say, a roulette table, he can tell you where the best odds are of winning. He's a romance hero. He's got 7,000 terrific special skills. He's
yes,
like
right.
James Bond.
Sure. And he's
just normal dudes in the 1880s.
More importantly, everybody, he is really down to fuck. He loves that.
Oh, yeah. Loves to have a meal.
Loves a lady.
Very great. So the other thing that I think is really interesting, just to go back to this honesty piece, is he tells her, classic romance hero business here. He is unable to love her.
Oh.
And it's not about, for him, it's not about like, oh, my heart was broken, or like, it's not an emotional thing. It's just, he's like, I've been with a lot of women.
Yeah.
I have some family, and I don't know what love is. I don't know how to perceive love. Love is not a thing that I can give you. And she's like, okay. And we're like, haha, dummy. So setting that aside, there's also, we meet him, like Jen said, at this, buying a bowl. But these bowls, like this porcelain comes back, periodically. And one of the things that obviously, like, this is not, and literally anybody will see this and see that, like, what Ashley is telling us in the story. But, he is very keenly aware of worth. Like,
yes,
what a bowl is worth.
Yeah,
what a
value,
person is worth. Like, value is a thing that Ian sort of instinctively understands.
Yeah.
And we see him be very honest. Like, he's a very forthright, like, this is a person who, he simply cannot be a bad person because, like, he cannot be unethical because, like, he simply cannot lie.
Yeah.
And there is a moment later kind of in the book where they go there, there's a bit of this book is in Paris, a bit of it is in London, a bit of it is in Scotland. There's a sort of a hint of Rome. Like, we never know sort of where we're going to end up, but they're going from Paris to Scotland, and they stop for one afternoon in London because he's heard tell that there's like this special Ming bowl. And he goes to his dealer and he sees the bowl and he says,
his bowl dealer is, I'm sorry, like, it's so great.
His bowl dealer. And he says, like, it's worth 600 pounds or guineas, 600 guineas. And the bowl dealer is like, what? I was only going to ask you for 300. And he's, but it's worth 6. So
there you go. Yeah.
And then as he's leaving, the like kind of first villain of the play, Beth's sort of ex-fiance, is coming in with his bowl, which he was going to trade for it. And Ian sees his bowl and says, like, well, that bowl is $1,200 or 1,200 guineas. Like, you would have made a bad deal. And the guy, of course, is just blustery and terrible because he, like, is upset that he didn't see the truth of the value, right? And so this is kind of, again, like the way that we come to understand who Ian is. Like, he's about truth. He's about honesty. He's about, like, understanding the natural and, like, uninflated value of things. And the second he lays eyes on Beth, he is like, I've never seen anything more valuable than this woman. And I must have her. This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by HarperCollins, publishers of Lori Gilmore's The Daisy Chain Flower Shop.
Okay, so everybody, if you love like a cozy romantic mysteries, and obviously you are probably very familiar with this Dream Harbor series by Lori Gilmore, and this is the 6th book. And what we have here is Daisy is the owner of the said flower shop, right? And she's really she's fed up with being unlucky in love, but she's unlucky in other ways when the mayor in town declares that he has had a vision and he believes that her flower shop is cursed. And so now all of a sudden business is really slow, and newcomer to town, Elliot, has been adjusting to small town life. He's had his own relationship struggles and basically hears about this vision and thinks, I cannot get anywhere near that flower shop because I have had enough bad luck in my life. I don't need more. But one day he has no choice but to walk through the front door of the shop and doesn't expect this life-changing moment because he and Daisy seem to be perfect for each other. So could the unluckiest woman in Dream Harbor finally find that love comes when you least expect it?
Well, if you love a small town and a cozy vibe, this 6th standalone romance in the Dream Harbor series just might be for you. It is available right now in print, ebook, or audiobook. And if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title to be taken to buy the book. Thanks so much to HarperCollins and to Lori Gilmore for sponsoring this week's episode.
After essentially Ian tells her the truth about this guy that she's with, almost about to marry, which is basically that he, has some, what Ian considers sort of deviant sexual tastes and keeps a brothel full of women that will cater to him. And Beth is sort of what's fascinating about this is Beth is actually not shocked by any of that. She seems to actually, because of how she grew up, right, really kind of on the mean streets of London, really understand that people have different tastes, and that's not a big deal for her. But what she is really upset about is this sense that she can't really trust her own judgment anymore. That she kind of knew that things were off, but just couldn't bear to really look at it. And she's wondering kind of what's wrong with her, that she would have been willing to sort of saddle herself to this man, even kind of overriding her gut instincts. And she wonders if this is essentially, I think what a really interesting thing about this book is that over and over again, sort of high society is presented as being morally corrupt, right? Full of liars in every way. And that's why neither, right, as you said, Beth or Ian can be happy there. So she departs for Paris. She's well, I've always wanted to learn how to paint. And you learn to paint in Paris. Who knew? And then, so she's, sort of on the Strand one day, painting. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing. And she meets Isabella Mackenzie. And this is
kind of casually.
Sure.
Romance, romance coincidence.
Romance coincidence. And, and then romance friendship develops. And because it's romance white ladies, Isabella is why don't you just come stay with me in my home?
Oh, man,
right?
White lady.
I was always you don't even know this woman. But I guess it was a different time, and they were rich woman romance.
Wait, can I tell a story about this that is actually? Can you just pause for a second?
I would happy to.
So I'm right now reading the new. I'm reading. I sound so dorky, everybody, but I'm reading the new translation of the Odyssey, the one by
I think that's nice, Emily Wilson.
Emily Wilson's new translation of the Odyssey, and it begins with 100 pages of Emily Wilson's analysis of the Odyssey. We're basically, and people are men are up in arms about this translation because Emily Wilson is writing it, and she has a different gaze on this text. But one of the things that I think is really interesting that she talks about is this idea of exenia, Xenia, in Greek and in mythology, right? Which is stranger as concept, but also an idea of friendship embedded in this concept. And it's because prior to, and this is not true of 1881 when this book is, and when Isabella decides that she's come live with me, but prior to a certain time, there were no hotels. There were not, you didn't,
right.
If you were traveling some stranger was going to have to open their doors and fucking feed you.
Not fuck and feed you unless you got really lucky. Fucking feed you, everybody. I just want to clarify.
So, like, one of these things that's really interesting is this idea that, like, in these books, when we're talking about, like, long distances and, like, what happens between cities, often we are talking about, prior to 1800, we're talking about, like, hopefully someone will simply let us in. And it's interesting because as I was reading this, this sort of preface, I don't think it is a preface, like, but it's, the 100 pages that are Emily's in this book, right? She has a big section on this, like, idea that Odysseus, as he's traveling, like, one of the ways that we as readers or as, like, listening to these stories, we're learning the mythology of genre carries the myth, right? The mythology of, like, how we interact with strangers. And I was thinking about, like, the books about the American West, right? Like, going west and how we expected, how that travel works, like how you are expected to sort of welcome a stranger. Which was bad news bears for Native Americans, indigenous people. But what's interesting here is, yes, this, in a classic romance, white lady fashion, Isabella is not worried at all about
and
Beth
in fact,
coming
like,
to live
way
in her
later,
house.
you find out that, like, Beth is wearing earrings, that Isabella was like, "Oh, darling, I just don't look good in them. You take them." So everybody just watch out. If I ever come to your house, romance heroine is going to be like, "Hey, I like these earrings," and it's your job to be like, "Oh, they look better on you than on me."
Just be like, I'm traveling in the ancient Greek way.
Sure. So anyway,
America.
But it is, right, it has to be, like, mostly it's like romance coincidence. Now, I was thinking, because we either last week we had Kate on or next week Kate is coming on and we're talking about books set in Paris.
And it didn't even occur to me.
It occurred to me, but I was like, well, I know we're going to be talking about this book, so I'm going to hold it.
But it's also not a book about Paris.
No, but I did find myself really thinking about, and maybe this is something I did say, that I do think in a lot of historical romances, Paris is more of, like, a concept, kind of like in American fiction, like New York is, right? Like, you're going to go to New York and you're going to find artistic community and you're going to, right? Like, and I do think that, like, her decamping, and it's also,
right? Cameron's a painter and he's got his muse and his garret in Montparnasse or wherever they are.
Exactly. And I think that, like, part of what was interesting to me about the, like, Paris section, because they are there actually a really long,
for, like, a third
time,
of the book, yeah,
is that it also is now, like, right, like, okay, when we first meet Ian and Beth, they are in London and we see them as outsiders. But then when they get to Paris, it's like a different way they can interact with each other because, like, those rules don't quite exist the same way for them. Right. And I did find myself thinking that that's the other thing, that, like, Paris is often kind of the role pair. I mean, like, again, like Lord of Scoundrels, like, right. You can be kind of, like, wild and crazy in Paris. There's a way that you can be, I don't know, like, just experience the continent, I guess. and I don't know that that's what Beth is looking for necessarily. But I do think what she is looking for is, I don't want to be somewhere where I'm just a prize to be won because of the money I now have in the bank. Right? And so that's going to be Paris for her. But at the same time, we see that Isabella has essentially, like, run away from London in the same way, right? This is where you go when you're running away, but you're rich and fabulous. So either way, like, what ends up happening is, of course, Ian shows up at the house a couple of times, right? Like, there's all of this kind of talk between them. But the other thing that is, like, introduced at this point is there is a Inspector Fellows who is right, the kind of the bad guy, who is
sort of the bad guy.
Yeah.
Just an annoying fucking police. He's a
Yes,
cop.
he's a
He's just
cop.
like
He's
following, like, what? He's a cop with a bee in his bonnet.
yes, and he's convinced.
He's racially profiling Scotsmen is what he's doing.
Well, not any Scotsman, the Mackenzie brothers, right?
These
They're all
Mackenzies.
bad.
Yeah,
they're all
exactly.
bad in different ways. And this guy's, convinced he's going to be the one to bring them down. And in particular, there's been a murder back in London. And Ian clearly knows something about it. Well, one murder happened a long time ago, a woman named Sally, a couple of years earlier. And then there was a murder of a woman named Lily that has been very recent. And Ian clearly has some knowledge of it because he was trying to protect Lily.
And he was there.
Right. And he was there somehow. He saw the scene. And Fellows goes to Beth and is basically like, you are hanging out with these people who I think did this. And she's basically like, what's your jurisdiction? Get the fuck out of here. And it's also great to like see how, I mean, she's just a great character. And this is to me kind of when I really started to like really appreciate just how, I don't know, she just has a lot of street smarts, essentially, is like how I would describe this about someone now, right? Like she's someone who doesn't really take a lot of bullshit, and she can tell that like something is really up, that there's no way that this cop could be like over in Paris, trying to do what he's doing, that he has his own agenda, whatever that is, right?
Well, and he asks her to marry him.
Yes, which is so weird. Ian has also asked her to marry him.
Everybody wants to
everybody
marry
wants
this
to
lady.
marry Beth.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because one of the other things, like, there is nothing, like, at the beginning of this book, we sort of perceive Beth through her own eyes.
Yes.
And she seems pretty fucking ordinary through her own eyes.
Yes.
And suddenly it's like everyone and their mother wants to marry her. And they're all like, well, the first one wants to marry her because she has, 10 million like current day dollars, like suddenly in her bank account, right? So that's understandable. But then it's like Ian sees her and like can't deal. He's like, I want to grab it, right? And then
and I guess it's funny because my take on that is
he
like
literally says to her, like in their first meeting, he's like, I just want to eat you out.
Yes.
Like,
whoa, dude.
okay.
And I guess basically he's like, if you're a real lady, the only way that can happen is if we get married. So, and she's like, tempting offer, but pass.
But weird, right?
Yes.
And then like in comes this cop who's like, I want to marry you too. And she's like, what? And he's like, but I like being a police officer. So like, I'm not really in it for the money. You can do what you want. Let's just get married. And I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But obviously what's going on is Beth is super hot.
Yeah. That's really all you need to know about that. So,
but by the way, plus sized everybody. One of the like an early historical plus size character.
it's really, I was really fascinated too by like the many ways in which Beth is a real, her story, and also she herself is kind of hyper aware of the way that like women just don't really get to be in charge of their own lives. And so through essentially they leave Paris after Beth and Ian get married. And the reason they get married is because they end up kind of running away from the inspector, right? Like they end up in a, hotel for the night, whatever it's called. And I think they do it. That's when they do it.
It's the first time they actually had penetrative sex. They've done a lot.
They've done a lot of other stuff.
Listen, Ian's got his head under this lady's skirts whenever
all
he
the
can
time.
Get
Can't
under
get
there.
enough. And
Loves
and
a
then
cunny.
Inspector Fellows shows up the next morning, and Ian essentially has sort of figured out, Cameron or the servant comes and sort of figures this out, and Ian's like, well, we're just gonna have to get married, don't worry, I've got a priest here to marry us.
And he doesn't really tell her anything. He's just like, don't worry about it, now there's a priest, we're getting married. It's a little bit, it's heavy-handed on his part.
Presumptuous. But then Inspector Fellows comes in and is basically like, well, I'm going to charge Ian with kidnapping you. And it's that moment where Beth is like, but I'm telling you that didn't happen. And he's like, well, you just don't even know what happened, what has happened to you.
Women don't know.
Women don't know. And Ian's like, well, I can't kidnap my own wife. So ha ha, joke's on you. And then what's actually kind of hilarious is the rest of the book, everyone keeps calling Beth Mrs. Ackerley, including Hart, which is the older brother of the Duke. He's such a dick. And so the whole time everyone wants to marry her. And then she finally gets married to Ian and no one ever calls her Lady Mackenzie.
No, she's like roaming around yelling at everybody for not calling her,
she's
Mrs.
like,
Ian.
listen, in fact, I am Mrs. Ian
Lady
Mackenzie.
Ian Mackenzie, yeah.
I would say, I think we should talk about the sex now because, they got married
and then we
they've
have
done
to talk
it.
about the plot because it's bonkers.
Well, as you can tell.
Yeah, all right, let's talk about the sex. Ian Mackenzie's great at it, everyone. He is DTF.
He really is. Yeah, that should be our title. Ian Mackenzie, DTF.
Is DTF. So I mean, what's interesting about the sex though in this book is he's like clearly obsessed with her. He also like because I think in a lot of ways like he is, because of his like penchant for honesty and truth, like he doesn't have a sense of like kink being, shameful, or like he likes what he likes.
Right.
And like later it becomes clear that like Hart has a sort of very particular kink.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of kink actually in this book. The first guy that she's engaged to has likes to be like he has like several dominatrixes like on call at all times. Hart likes to dominate, and Ian like just likes to get out under there and like get things done. And it's great because it does sort of have a sort of classic 2010 argument, which is like Beth likes sex.
Yeah.
Like her husband, she loved her husband.
Even though he was a vicar, everybody
was a vicar, but
yes.
felt like she should know that sex was nice.
Yes.
And could feel good. But like she's never had oral sex in either direction.
Yeah.
And so there's this moment where they're like in a carriage. And I think this is so funny because it's a perfect like historical moment, right? Where they're in a carriage and he sort of says something like, we could have some fun in this carriage. And she's like, well, what if we got into a carriage accident and then I wasn't wearing my underpants, right? Like,
it's so funny.
And so she's like, I would like to see you naked but at this point, like he's seen her plenty of times.
Yeah.
Like he's seen all the different parts of her in various stages of undress. And she's like, I haven't seen you. And he's like, well, what would you like to see? And she's like, well, I would like to, I don't know. And he's like, come get it. What would you like to see? All my clothing has unfastenings.
Yeah.
Like, and so she unbuttons his pants.
Yeah.
And then is like, here's a penis. I'm going to explore it. And it is a really great, listen, there's fellatio in a lot of books, everyone.
Yeah.
This is a really great BJ.
Like,
it's a really fun scene to read.
Yeah.
Because she's like really excited to do it.
Yeah.
And often I think like when we're reading sex, especially now, like sex in books feels very perfunctory. First they do this and then they do this and then they do this. And like, it doesn't mean it's not sexy, but it's like there's very little surprise on the page, right? And I think in this particular book, and I don't know if it's because when I read it, it felt sort of extra sexy at a time when like books were not as sexy as they are right now, or if it's just like the really special work of Jennifer Ashley in this scene. But like this scene is hot, but it's hot because it's exploratory, because you can sort of see Beth experiencing something she's never experienced before, and taking real, like, intellectual pleasure in it, too.
All right, you sort of were saying, like, sex in a lot of books now is, like, perfunctory. I also think it's very much, like, it's been sort of tropified, right? Like, I'm going to put in these, like, sex acts.
He's so that daddy.
Yeah, right. He comes in his
He
pants and,
says, "Good
whatever.
job,
Right,
baby
good
girl."
girl, right. And there's a way in which like the reason that feels perfunctory or not interesting is because it's not really driven by the characters, it's driven by the reader, right? We're doing this because it's what the reader wants or what will please the reader or what will make the reader put my book on the list of like top 10 books where he comes in his pants. You can hear in my voice, I hope the disdain I have for this is like a thing, because when instead your sex scenes are driven by the characters and who they are, that is when you get this like thrill of discovery, right? Not right, like this sense of them really like, again, this is why sex and romance is important. It's because they are discovering something about who they are as people by doing this together. This is like the magic of romance. And so it's like these moments. And then, like for Ian, I would say like it is like the first time he is able to meet her eyes is after like they have some kind of sex. And it doesn't last for long. He like sort of looks away immediately, but there is something incredibly powerful about this moment for her and for him too, right? Like it's never in his point of view, but we understand that like if he was so, at the very end he talks about it, but like at that moment, if he's meeting her eyes, it's because his whole world has been rocked. And so I think like that to me is part of why like these sex scenes really hit. It's not just because like they're fun and plentiful and that they have a great time together, right? Like this isn't a book about, sort of him being like, don't worry, I've learned all these things at the brothels, let me show you. Right. It's been a long dry spell for her. She has not done much since her husband has
7
died,
years.
right? But she is into it too. And together they are like making this new world with each other. And it's the sex that allows them to do that. And I think for Ian, especially, one of the things about, right, like at the beginning, you're like, he's like, I can't love because I have done these. I've had sex with people. I have paid women to be with me. I'm comfortable with that. But it's never been anything more. And now we see that it is something more for him.
Yeah.
Right. This is one of the many like kind of pathways that are like, that he's like sort of traveling down and realizing like, oh, in fact, this is different. This is different for me. The way I'm thinking about her, what things I want to do with her, how thrilled I am to like sort of push her boundaries, and that therefore is pushing mine. It's spectacular. And I think that that's just like so it's like really, these are fun scenes.
They are. That's really what it is. Like everybody's enjoying themselves, including you. Like,
right. But it's also like doing incredible character work.
Yes, agreed. And I think that there's this really interesting piece, which is the side characters, like all the secondary characters, at least in the Mackenzie family, right?
Yeah.
And her like companion, Katie, are all kind of like, the two of you are fucking hot for each other.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Go be hot for each other. Like, nobody here is going to judge you, right? Isabella's like constantly like, oh, I don't really feel like going for a carriage ride. Like you guys go together.
You guys go have a nice time.
And, and then Cameron is sort of like, oh, I have to paint this painting. So like you have 5 days together alone. Like everybody's sort of like, it doesn't matter. None of the stupid rules of society are relevant to the Mackenzies because they've had so many terrible things happen to them. There's so much scandal sort of brewing around them. And I guess this is the part where we should probably start talk about the rest of the family, right? Which is for all of the like history that I told you about this book, what you said is true, Jen. Like it's very clear that we are looking at like multiple books being teed up.
Yeah.
Right. We have Cameron, the painter whose wife and who's estranged from his wife, but who isn't far from her. And like, they seem to like not be able to avoid each other, despite the fact that like something terrible has clearly happened between them.
Yeah.
And then there's Hart, right? The Duke, who is when we first meet him, in his own point of view, by the way.
Yeah, it was really
Rome,
interesting, right?
Is like, how fucking dare some woman come and marry Ian, right?
Yeah.
And then he goes home to Scotland. We discover ultimately kind of tells Ian's like, factotum that he wants that he like Ian has the kind of like second in command who's magical, like does
Yeah.
everything he needs to do. And he basically tells Ian second in command, like, get thee to Scotland. Like
Yeah.
everybody has to come home.
Yeah.
And so when they get to Scotland, you meet Hart, who is a monster.
A jerk. He's so terrible. And of course, I was like, I can't wait to read his book. I'm such an asshole.
You just want him to be taken down every single fucking peg. And like it's told, and of course, Jennifer Ashley knows the job, right? Like,
Yeah.
Hart's first wife, who was a quiet mouse, died in childbirth. Like, he was devastated, or like became a monster after that. Like, what?
Yeah.
You know, what could it be? Right. And then it becomes clear that like Hart has this mistress who is a kind of known, very skilled courtesan in London. And here we start to get, so this is like, we're, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through, maybe 70% of the way through. And Hart, we're with Hart. Like, Hart really doesn't trust Beth at all.
Right.
And then it starts to become clear, like, something is going on. Like, Hart and Ian have a very sort of strained relationship, but like, is it just that he doesn't trust Ian to like not be returned to the asylum? Like, there's a lot of sort of question marks related to Hart and Ian's relationship. And also we have Scotland Yard sort of coming for them with this idea that Scotland Yard believes that Ian has killed these two women. And the story comes out that, like, in fact, Ian and Hart were with, the woman who was killed years ago, Sally. And they did, Ian was in her room privately, and then Hart was in her room, and then, like, suddenly she was dead. And it becomes clear that each thinks the other
one did it, which I did love this. I'd sort of forgotten this part of the plot.
Me too.
That's sort of like we're both trying to protect the other one because we're Mackenzies. No one knows what we are capable of more than us.
Right. Except and it's really lovely. I mean, it's not lovely, but it's lovely in the writing of it because it also feels like Beth sort of comes to discover this, right? Like she's can't leave well enough alone. She's a real classic romance heroine, right? Who's like, I'm going to figure it all out on my own. And,
right.
So she's like traipsing around London, like trying to sort of figure out what happened to Sally and then to Lily, the newer
murder victim. Yeah.
And she sort of discovers this. And in the discovering, it's made clear that Hart really believed that Ian was capable of this.
Yeah.
On his own.
Yes.
And Ian thinks Hart did it by accident. And so, like, there is a kind of moment where you're like, oh, Hart doesn't actually think Ian is, like, well.
Yeah, right.
And Beth is pissed.
Yeah, she's really angry.
And she should be.
Yeah.
Because, like, the betrayal, there's sort of this moment of really seeing, and again, it's like, it's the time that the book was written. It's the author. This is a book that, like, kind of takes the finger on the tee up of Hart's book in the sense that, like, Hart is not the best person. He's not a good brother. Like, in the sense that he's like, I don't want Ian to go back to the asylum. That's nice. But, like, I believe you are capable of murdering a sex worker.
Yeah.
Is right. Like not the greatest way of feeling about your sibling, who we all know couldn't do that. Like, it's just simply not in his character.
Well, and it's interesting, though, because Ian also fears that he is capable of it, right? After seeing his father murder his mother.
You're right.
He is sort of convinced that there is like some sort of deep well of anger in him that like essentially his rages. And he thinks like, well, I must be like my father. My rages must come from that same place as opposed to, my rages actually weren't rages at all. And I think it's best.
Well, he was tortured in the asylum.
Yes.
It comes to be clear. It's made clear and like, I mean, this is a real hallmark of Jennifer Ashley. Like Jennifer Ashley tortures her heroes
Yeah.
and her heroines, but like she is not afraid of going to a very dark place emotionally.
Yeah.
And it becomes clear that like when Ian was in the asylum, he had a friend
Yes.
who was committed for being gay. And this friend who had no reason to be in this asylum had an erotic book. And it was discovered. And but this guy was so ill in the hospital and fragile that Ian took the fall for this book and was
Like subsequently tortured.
Yeah, with electroshock therapy for being in possession of this book.
Yeah. And I mean, it's clear that this happened, but also just as a matter of course, everyone
he was tortured for everybody,
tortured
by
the
everybody.
quacks, right?
But this is a particular, like, how did the headaches start? They started with this, like, electroshock therapy. Quote, therapy. So then, anyway, so all of this is going on. Hart's not a very good brother. Like, there's sort of a revelation. There's like, and then it becomes like clear. Beth sort of figures out like, oh no, Sally and Lily knew each other.
Yes.
And not only did they know each other, they were lovers.
They were lovers, right?
So somebody killed both of these women intentionally. Like it was like they realized there was a connection and killed both of them.
Yes.
And then it's sort of like moves into a real like soap opera-y, like,
oh yeah, for sure,
twisty turny ending, right?
It did. And listen, I was sort of fine with it. Like
this book is also like it's written at a 10. Like it's like everything's dialed up to 10 on this, so I'm with it too. Like
I was really interested. One of the things I was really interested in the fact was like, okay, so remember Beth at the beginning says I'm going to go to Paris because I want to learn how to paint. And Cameron is the painter in the family, but it's very clear that like Beth actually has a real eye and is very interested in like art herself. So the way she sees paintings plays like a key part in the like sort of role at like kind of a bunch of big events at the end of the book. But so, there's like paintings in the like family home in Scotland where it's like, on this landing, it's like the previous Duke, and on this landing, it's the Duke before that. And, so she, of course, most people be like, yeah, I go up the stairs and I'm seeing my grandparents. But like these are men, especially the father. This is a man who tortured essentially his own son by having him committed. And, Beth is really like outraged by that. Like she's able to sort of like, there's this great thing in this book, which is that like every painting really is the truth. There's a part where Isabella shows her the painting that Cameron painted of her on their wedding night. And, it's like a nude of her. It was kind of like, I don't know if I'd be showing friends my nudes, but okay. It's a different time. And in this painting, Beth is able to see what Isabella can't, which is like, Cameron's in love with you. No, I've seen his other work and I see this work. And that tells me that like the feelings he has for you are real. And I think like it's a nice connection to the way Ian is so connected to art, right? For him, it's these bowls. There's a way in which I like am really interested in like Beth's eye for the world, right? And I think that the book is really does a great job of, I don't know, like just showing that like her interest in the murder, like sort of solving this murder, isn't just like a one-off, right? Like, yes, it is obviously driven by her feelings for Ian, her love for him, and her determination to sort of basically like make it so that these cops, like Scotland Yard, has to leave them alone. But it is really very much relies on like sort of us understanding that Beth is a person who has always been a keen observer of humanity and human nature.
Yes.
Because of the way she was raised. And she can do that without judgment. And that she is in that way, like very much like the flip side of Ian, who can do the same thing, but he is essentially been called mad because of it. And she is, I mean, I don't know. I felt that the book was saying, I think, something really interesting about like, I don't know, the skills we develop as coping strategies and when they're rewarded or when they are lauded versus when they are, seen as being evil, bad, wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe,
I think that's true. I also think this book is saying a lot about class.
Oh,
And I
absolutely. Yeah.
know that class, I feel like all historicals are about class.
Yes.
And arguably probably most romance is about class, but I think that it's saying a lot about class through the lens of like, if the sort of suggestion is, if Beth were anything other than who she is,
Mm-hmm.
they would not have solved this. Like, they
Yes.
would not be safe, right? Like,
Agree. Yeah.
the money is so irrelevant to Beth. Like,
Yeah.
her having the money it actually initially feels like Beth's like, oh, now I have to deal with all this, right?
Yeah.
And then, but ultimately, like, the money has no bearing on her character whatsoever. And but also it's sort of, there's this real sense of like, Beth is a working girl. Like,
Yeah.
not working girl, like sex worker, but like, oh, she like is a person who,
Yeah.
she interacts with the world in a very particular way.
Yeah.
And that way is, it's tactile and it's immersive, and it's, her engagement with people and places. Like, even when she's like, I'm heading off to Covent Garden to figure out what the fuck is going on, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not like I'm gonna put on a costume and pretend to be part of that world. She's just like, this is she's comfortable.
She's comfortable with it. It's not even a big deal. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that is also kind of, it's interesting because I think the Mackenzies too, like, the only Mackenzie who really cares at all about like class is Hart, who is like,
Yeah.
you know, she's like, I have 100,000 pounds, and he's like, well, Ian has 10 times that, so
Yeah.
it's still important. And she's
Right.
like, yeah, but it's not though. Like,
yeah.
and I think money is really, the discussions of money are really interesting in this book. Like, I think this is a book that sort of flattens the discussion of class on the page in a way that really underscores what we're doing here.
Yeah. I was really interested. The part I think that I was really interested in is that, okay, so in terms of Beth's relationship to the woman she worked with, and I can't remember her name right now, although she talks about it over and over again.
Bertelsmann, Bemmelsmann.
Whatever it is, like, it's something. She's constantly like sort of talking about, well, so-and-so thought this. I think that in terms of like her relationship to that woman, she played the role essentially of like Curry, and Curry is Ian's valet. And one of the things that is really well done is that once she sort of becomes part of the family, or like starts to get to know Ian better, the way they talk about Curry and what Curry's job is and the things Curry does and that Curry's good at and the problems Curry will sort of solve without anybody even having to tell him, Beth is really uncomfortable with it. Right? She is over and over again sort of like noticing how they talk about Curry.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to imagine. It's because that must have been the way that people talked about her. Right? And yet there's a time at the end where she's she and Curry are, she's like, like, I'm like you. And Curry's like, come on, come on now. That's not true. Because at the point where you actually do have 100,000 pounds in the bank, you are not like Curry anymore. And I think that's the part that is like the class part that's really interesting for Beth, is like her knowledge of kind of the real world is something that helps her solve this problem, right? Kind of figuring out what all the things that happened. And it's what makes her not afraid of, Inspector Fellows. It's what makes her kind of really valuable to Ian and the rest of the family. It's just,
she's been fighting for herself for her whole life.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's something very powerful about that. Like, that it separates her out as a heroine in romance. Like, often we see like the scrappy heroine. I mean, I've written her too, right? But like, are you really scrappy if you've been like, if you're used to having like, you have a safety net to the tune of millions of pounds and power, right? But Beth is because that's who she is,
Mm-hmm.
not because
Yeah.
this like windfall of money has not changed her
Right.
in her mind. Like, I mean, obviously to Curry,
Right.
she's different. To Katie, she's different. But, you know, I think a lot about, in the early days of writing historicals, I remember my editor saying to me, like, you know, you have to watch out for servants, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because if characters talk too much to their servants,
Yeah.
it starts to ring false.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because at the time I can remember sort of really grappling with that. Like, what does that mean, right? There's something like deeply American about, and also like
Yes.
middle class and
Yes.
bourgeois about like talking to your servants.
Yeah.
And I think like I struggled with that for a long time. Like, what does it mean that like if you put a servant on page for too long, the reader like rubs up against it. And I think this is an interesting conversation. Like, this is a book where servant class is sort of is there and present.
Well, that's because,
and not in a weird way, like
Right.
in a believable way.
Right. Well, and I think it's believable because like what we see here is that Curry and Katie are like really instrumental to like steering these two towards like sort of like kind of more acceptable behavior.
Yeah, well, it also
Right?
makes sense that Beth would be interested in them, care about them,
Yes,
talk to
of
them.
of course, right?
See
of
them.
course. Whereas Ian does not really seem as aware of like the ways that Curry, the very many ways that Curry like kind of like makes his life easier, but also probably unaware of the ways that Curry's real boss's heart.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. And it's interesting in the sense that, but it is interesting that she doesn't talk about servants in any other cases in this book, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
She's so focused on like Beth has Katie and Ian has Curry.
Right.
And you never see a footman or like an anything anywhere else. Like it is really like a lens through, like the lens we are looking at servants is a very particular one.
Yeah. I think the only exception is the housekeeper. Or like the cook. And you know, and it's later in the book remember when Beth has essentially gone out to like her old neighborhood, asked for information from one of the working girls, one of the sex workers.
Yeah.
And that woman is like, oh, I know somebody who might know something. I'll send her to you. And the cook or the housekeeper won't let her in. She's on the back stairs with Katie.
Right.
Because this housekeeper, even though this woman has like married and has become like sort of respectable, like the housekeeper can tell. And what that kind of reminds me of is, did you ever read the book? God, it was a book by Emma Klein with the green cover. Okay, so the book I'm talking about is called The Guest. And in this book, there's a young woman who is essentially like scamming her way through the Hamptons, through parties in the Hamptons. And none of the rich people can sort of tell that she's a scammer. And it's not until she gets to a home with like essentially she kind of befriends like one of the servants or whatever, who was like, yeah,
a normie.
I knew all along that you were a scammer. I knew you were more like me. And it's just like really fascinating part where like in that moment, right, this housekeeper or cook in Beth's home has a better sense of like who these people are right. And I always like that, right? Like that if you are someone who works for very rich people, that you probably have a very finely tuned sense of like who is really one of that world, who is really a part of that world and who isn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of like the ending, there is just a lot of drama.
It's
the murder is solved.
There's a lot of
right
comes together.
Yeah. Inspector Fellows comes back, and you know, there's just a ton going on.
And then Ian, you know, does sort of. I love the moment where he says, like, "Is this what love feels like?" Because I don't like it.
Well, because Beth is injured, right? Of course. The very thing that he was most worried about is that she would be injured, and she is. There's an amazing sickbed scene, right, where he's just like, you know, devastated and reading all the books he can about how to treat ill people. And it's 1881, so like there's, actually some decent information out there.
And some actual doctoring can happen.
Infections and all. But, when I will say this, one of my favorite, everybody, she's basically been in a coma for a week or something, and she wakes up and they're like sort of talking, and she understands that he has been devastated and really freaked out. And like, there's a point at which he wants to kiss her, and she's like, I must be disgusting. But then she like gets turned on, and I was like, no, listen, you literally have been in your coma. I don't think you come out and you're like, oh, like, now I'm feeling it between my legs.
Sleepy,
like, what?
Probably. Whatever. It's romance
It's
coma.
It's romance coma. Okay, good point. But anyway.
Having written a million, like, she might be dying, and now she's awake, and let's bang it out in this room in the middle of nowhere.
So funny.
That's romance sickness.
Yes, of course.
Romance health says that the first thing that returns
that's the first
is your
thing to come
libido.
back online. Vaginal wetness.
And also, I should say, there is that sort of lovely moment where Hart says to him, like, because Beth really tears a strip off of Hart.
Yeah, she does.
It's like, how fucking dare you? All you do is use him.
Yeah.
And you think so poorly of him. Because at one point, Hart is like, he is mad. And she's like, no, fuck you. And also, fuck you for using him for your businesses and your contracts and your money and your books. Like, you suck.
Yeah. And you know what's great is like Hart, I think like these four dummies, these brothers have no idea how to like be kind or love each other.
No, and then when he's like,
Hart's
I love you.
I guess you're right. I was
But he says it, he couches it as like, I guess it might be unmanly, but I do love
of course.
you. And like,
I did laugh. It's amazing. A+. Yeah.
And then you sort of feel to yourself like, all right, well, here's a little crack in the armor for Hart, who is hopefully going to get, taken apart by some woman later in the series.
Yeah. Well, and it's like even mentioned at the end, right? Like the woman who got away that he's going to finally go after.
His first love.
Right.
Eleanor or Eileen or something. It begins with an E.
Sure.
Anyway, listen, and the rest of the series is really fun. Like, these guys keep coming back. Beth's around. Ian, I'm sure, is just having a meal every single book.
Sure. Collecting his bowls, having a meal. Dealing with contracts and negotiations.
I'm particularly fond of when she's like, what about a Ming vase? And he's like, I don't know anything about vases. I only know about bowls.
I know. It's so great. It is. It really is.
It's just a very, very, like...
It's a great book.
Terrific historical that just hits on every level. I also just have to underscore that it's set in the 1880s.
Yeah.
And, which is a very different world. And I think that also like gives it a really like fresh sparkle.
I will also say, everybody, I reread it in audio this time, right? Because it's sometimes when I'm rereading it, I thought it was great. I had a really nice time with this audio. So,
who is the person?
I don't know. Let me look.
Oh, it's not like a classic.
No, it was not somebody I knew. Well, and that's why I was kind of like,
Jane Wells.
This could go poorly, right? Like this, if this is an older audiobook. But it's great. The woman does it's a single narrator, but she does a great Scots accent, I thought. And so let me see who it is. It is Angela Daw.
Okay.
I feel like I know that name.
Cool.
So yeah, she was great. And so if you're thinking you might like enjoy that audio, I would say that you will. And I did.
Well, fun. Listen, read more historical, everybody.
Definitely.
Historicals are fun.
They sure are. God, they sure are.
It's because you know why? It's just very freeing.
Yeah, exactly. We do actually know our next read along because it will be in June, and we are going to read 7 Days in June by the great Tia Williams. Now, we've talked about this book before. When this came out, we had Tia on the podcast, and Tia herself has a new book coming out in June, but we are going to read 7 Days in June. So that gives you some time to read it in case you have not had the pleasure. It is terrific.
Nice. Well, that's our next one, and then after that we have another. We will, who knows what, because it'll be almost the end of our year, and God, we're coming up on the end of season. What are we on? 8?
We're on the end of season 8, but we still have months of season 8 to go.
Christ, I know, I know, but it doesn't feel like it is. It feels like everything is racing towards summer right now. I need everybody to calm the fuck down. God. Also, like, why is middle school? Why is there so much to do? I was promised that they would get calmer. Anyway.
That person lied to you.
I know. But we've almost survived, knock on wood, 7th grade, Jen. So, you told me.
I was like, if you make it through 7th grade, you can really make it through anything.
Anyway, everybody, I'm Sarah McLean. I'm here with my friend Jen Prokop. We are Fated Mates. You can listen to us every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts. There are almost a full 8 seasons to get through, too, if you're new to us this week. If you love talking about romances, love talking about books, then you can find a 24/7 faucet of talking about books and romances over on the Discord that we run. The Fated Mates Discord is accessible through the Fated Mates Patreon, where you can join for a tiny amount every month and have access to the Discord and one extra episode every month as well from us. Those episodes are more like casual, sort of free-rolling discussions of, what we do and don't like in the world. So you can join us there for those. The Patreon is at fatedmates.net/Patreon. And again, that will get you direct access to the Discord once you've signed up. You can also find us at fatedmates.net, where our show notes exist. You can click on episodes and see the show notes, as well as a list of all the books that we brought up today, and the original covers of Lordy and Mackenzie and Not. You'll also see on show notes a link to the historical Kickstarter that we're doing with AH2, Adriana Herrera and Allie Hazelwood have put together a stunning collection of hardcover, foiled, sprayed edge, leather-bound box set of Lord of Scoundrels, Indigo, The Magpie Lord, Dreaming of You, and Butterfly Swords, 5 books that we love and have done deep dives on before here. And then you can also find us online at Instagram and Threads at Fated Mates Pod, and on Blue Sky at Fated Mates. I think that's it for now. Summer is coming. Oh, and May 12th, everyone, the paperback of These Summer Storms comes out. It's floppy. It has sprayed edges in the first print run, if that's a thing that you care about. And you can pre-order it wherever you get your books.
Amazing.
Thanks, everyone.